Rob here at eTrailer.com, and today you're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster high-powered diode wiring kit with a 7 to 6-way Flexo-Coiled wiring cable on our 2017 Jeep Compass. Whenever you're flat towing your Compass and you're driving down the road pulling with your motorhome, it's going to be a very important thing that everybody knows what's going on, you and all the other drivers on the road. So that's what our diodes are going to do. It's going to allow us to take that signal from our motorhome and transfer it and use the factory taillights to signal our brakes and our turn signals. That way our Jeep is going to mirror exactly what our motorhome's doing. That way we can all make sure that everyone's safe and everybody knows exactly what's going on. Not only is it going to keep all the people involved safe, but it's also going to protect our vehicle's wiring. It is going to tap directly into the system so we can use our existing taillights without having to use those magnetic lights, but it's also going to make sure that there's no backfeeding and it's not going to cause any damage to our Jeep if there was a problem on the motorhome end. And if you have ever towed with those magnetic lights, it's not that bad to put them up, but potentially could scratch the paint on our Jeep. We'd have to run a wire all the way from the back all the way up to the front, and that cable is going to be rubbing on the side again, almost scratching it, and we got to set it up every time we want to tow. And then once we get there, we got to take them down. But with our diodes, it's going to be a one-time installation. We don't have to hook anything up except the umbilical, and we're ready to hit the road. Now our kit's going to come with the 7 to 6-way cord. The 7-way is going to go into the motorhome end, and then the 6-way will plug into the plug that's on the front of our Jeep. And our cable here is going to have a coiled section. That way, once we have everything hooked up and those tow bar arms start stretching out, we'll have plenty of cable because this is actually going to stretch all the way out to 8 feet. But whenever it's compressed in, it's only going to be about 15 inches long. Now the kit's going to come with everything you need to get it installed on your Compass. It's going to come with the umbilical cable, the plug, the wiring, and 4 high-powered diodes. Now keep in mind that's only going to be one component you need for a complete safe flat tow setup. For a complete setup, you're going to need a base plate, a tow bar wiring, a braking system, and finally safety cables. So now that we've taken a look at our diodes and seen the end result, let's go ahead and put it on together. Now I do want to mention we have our fascia removed right now because we just installed our base plate, and that is going to make wiring up the vehicle a lot easier because we're not going to have to fight the grill or the fascia getting the wiring through. To begin your installation, you're going to want to find the spot that you're going to be mounting the 6-way on the front of your Jeep. You're going to take your wire, and starting at the front, you're going to run your wire all the way to the back of the Jeep. Now I do suggest leaving yourself a little bit of excess up front, that way you have enough wire so that you can wire up the plug. But I already went ahead and ran this, so I'll show you how I routed it down the car. So it started at the bracket here. I went over the top of my base plate, over to the side a little bit, came around, then came back through, zip tying it in place to the support. I went over the subframe support, but underneath my power steering rack. It came out right here. Then I actually took these bolts out, just using an 8mm socket, and this entire cover can come down. Then I ran my wire underneath, making sure it was nice and protected. And came out right here, continuing to zip tie it to these lines. Ran it around the outside of my fuel tank. Then I came up and I went over the support back here, coming around, making sure to go underneath the heat shield, and then I zip tied it to this anchor point right here. Now at this point we want to find the end of our wire, and we need to separate each one of these so it's an individual wire. The easiest way to do that is if you take a pair of cutters, and we're going to come in between each one of these wires and just cut a little bit. You want to be careful not to cut the wire itself, you just want to separate them. And once they are separated, just kind of grab it with your finger, and we're going to pull them apart until we have 4 individual wires, and we're going to separate them as far up to that last anchor point as we can. Now that we have all of our wires separated, we're going to move up top and we're going to take out our taillights. Now if we open up our hatch, we're going to have these 2 covers that are covering up the fasteners that are holding our taillight in place. So we can grab a flat blade screwdriver, and if we come up to the top section here, you just kind of pop them out. and that'll expose the two fasteners behind there. So we can grab a T25 Torx bit and we'll pull those two fasteners out. Once those are removed, we're going to want to grab our taillight and pull straight back. You don't want to pull too much to the side because there are some alignment pins and you don't want those to break. So we'll slide it back, make sure all the fasteners are loose, and we'll find the plug down here at the bottom. We'll press in on that tab and we can separate them. And we'll set our taillight aside and we can pull out the other side. Now that we have our taillights removed, you're going to want to turn on your headlights. That way we can find out which circuit is going to be for our running lights. So we're going to hook up our tester, and then I'm going to check each one of these pins and see which one is giving me the circuit. So it looks like we have two wires that are giving us a 12-volt signal. So what I'm going to do to figure out which one is which is I'm actually going to plug my taillight back in. And we can see that we have two lights on our taillight, and that's why we're getting two signals. So we want to make sure that we use the center one, not the outer ring. So the way I figured out the center light wire is we turn our light around and we know that both center pins coming from our vehicle is sending a signal out. So I followed both center pins on the other end, which will give me that brown and blue wire. Now if we follow our wires up, the brown wire is going to the side, which is the one we don't want to use. But the blue one is going to the light bulb that we want to use for our taillight signal. So we follow that blue wire over, and our blue wire is going to be the second pin from the inside. If we look, both of our wires are going to be orange and white. So we want to use the orange and white one that's farthest away from the black wire on the end. Now that we have our taillight signal figured out, we're going to turn our headlights off so we can isolate the brake signal. Now it's a good idea to get an extra set of hands so they can keep their foot on the brake, and you may need to turn the ignition on, but you don't need to start the Jeep itself. So I'll come back with my tester, and I'm going to test each one of the pins again to figure out which one is my brake signal. So we're getting a constant signal from this end wire, which is going to be an all white wire. So we know our taillight is going to be the one closest to the white wire, orange stripe, and then our brake signal is going to be the white wire on the very end. We're going to repeat that testing process for the other side as well. Now on the passenger side, the wires are in the same position, but they are a different color. Our brake wire is going to be the white wire with the green stripe, and then our taillight wire is going to be the one right next to it that's a tan wire with an orange stripe. Now we need to get the 4-pole wire up to the top so we can start making our connections. To help me get the wire up there, I'm going to take a piece of airline tube that I had laying around and use a coat hanger or whatever you have available. You just want something that's going to keep its structure when you start pushing on it. But I'm going to pass it down through in between the body and the fascia here, and so I can pass the wire all the way down and reach it underneath. You want to grab your yellow and brown wire. I'm going to take a little bit of electrical tape. I'm going to secure it to my airline tube so I won't drop it. Then you want to pull all the slack up, make sure it didn't get caught underneath, and that all the slack is up top here. And it's not a bad idea if you want to go ahead and zip tie it to the existing wiring here, that way it won't fall back down. Now we're going to get access to the wires on the inside of this loom. So very carefully you want to cut away any tape and the loom so we have a little bit more wire to work with. You just don't want to damage the wires inside, so you do want to be extremely careful when you're cutting this. Just peel it back and remove any excess tape. So we'll start with our brake signal, which is going to be that all white wire. I'm going to come downstream a little bit from the plug. I'm going to cut the wire in half. I'm going to strip back both ends. I'm going to grab one of our diodes with the blue connectors on it. We're going to grab 2 of the connectors off of them. Doesn't matter which one it is. Just grab one, and we're going to crimp these on to the end of our wires. We'll grab our diode and we'll pull the last connector off. Now the end on our diode that says out, it's only going to have a single terminal. That's going to go closest to the plug. So we'll plug that into that wire. We'll take our other wire, and it doesn't matter which one, but we're going to plug it into one of the in terminals. I'll leave us one last spot and one more connector. So we'll grab our yellow wire. We'll estimate about how much wire we need. I always like to give myself a little bit of extra. But we'll cut our wire, strip back the end of it, then we're going to crimp that last blue spade connector onto the end of it. And we can plug it into the other in terminal. And that's exactly how your turn signal or your brake signal diode should look. With that one connected, we'll move on to our taillight signal. This is going to be very similar, but there is one little bit of a difference. So we're still going to cut in half and put 2 blue spade connectors on there. The difference is we're going to grab the diode that has the yellow connector on it. We're still going to plug it in the same way. The one closest to the plug will go into the out. The one on the other side will go into one of the in terminals. Except this time we're going to grab our brown wire. Again, estimate about how much we need. We'll cut off the excess. Except this time we're going to hold on to it. We're going to strip the excess end and the end coming up from the bottom. We're going to combine the 2 ends together, and we'll take that yellow spade terminal, and it's just a little bit larger so it's easier to fit both the wires in there, and we'll crimp it in place and plug it into the other end of our diode. So now we're going to send our brown wire back down. We'll meet up with our green wire, and that's going to go over to the passenger side. Now for our diodes, I'm actually going to remove the backing. I'm just going to come down, make sure I have enough room for my wire to have some slack. I'm just going to stick it directly against the body. That way I won't interfere with my taillight in this area. I'll just remove the backing off the other one. Push it down a little bit out of the way. And now we should still have plenty of room to plug our taillight in. When you run your brown wire and your green wire across, you want to try to go behind the fascia supports and try to go over the bumper beam. It'll save you some slack and it'll keep it away from the exhaust. That way it won't get damaged. And we're going to use the same method using that pull wire to bring our wires up to the top. And we'll strip back all that tape and insulation on the passenger side and make our connections over here. This side has some cloth tape. It is a little tough to cut, so you do just want to be extra careful when you're cutting it not to cut the wires on the inside. But it's not like normal tape, so you are going to have to push a little bit to cut through. And over here, all our connections are going to be relatively the same, except we're not going to have any of the yellow connectors on our diodes. It should all be blue connectors. So we'll start by connecting up our brake signal over here, the white and green wire. We'll crimp on our diodes. Still connecting the out to the closest one to the plug. Plug the other end into the in terminal. We'll take our last diode. Estimate about how much green wire we're going to need. Strip back the end and crimp on our diode. We'll do the same thing for our taillight circuit. And finally, we'll secure our diodes in the relatively the same spot as we did on the other side. And plug our taillight back in. Then we can re-secure all the fasteners. Now we're going to have one more connection to make, and that's going to be our white wire. That's going to need to go to a good chassis ground. So we have a ring terminal in our kit, as well as a self-tapping screw. So I'm just going to bring my white wire over to where it's going to reach the bottom of the frame. I'm going to trim off the excess. I'll strip back the end of it, and I'll crimp on that ring terminal. We can grab the self-tapping screw from our kit, along with a 5/16 nut driver, and I'm going to drive the screw right into the bottom of the frame here. Now when you're tightening it up, you want to make sure it's nice and snug and that ring terminal is not going to move, but you don't want to strip it out. So now we can get ready to wire up our plug. So I'm going to take the wire out from the front. I'll grab the plug, pull the boot off the back of it, and for now, I'm just going to run the boot over the wire, just get it out of the way. We can come to the front. We're going to separate each one of these wires, except we're not going to have to go as far back as the other time. We're just going to separate them a little bit, so we have a little bit of wire to work with. And we'll strip back the end of each one of our wires. Now on the back of our plug, we're going to have 6 terminals. They are going to be labeled, but it's really small. So we're going to start at the top. The top one is going to be labeled TM for trailer marker. That'll be our brown wire. If we come going counterclockwise, the next one will be GD for ground, be the white wire. LT for left turn, that's the yellow wire. RT for right turn, that's your green wire. Now if you have a charge line, that would go in the center, and then the pin over here is for an electric brake. So we're not going to be using either of these in ours, so we're just going to go through, loosen up the set screws, and put our wires in place. You need a really small Phillips head screwdriver. You don't want to take these screws all the way out, just loosen them up. I'll take the bare end of our wire, we'll put it into the terminal, and whenever we start to tighten it up, I like to leave just a tiny bit of copper wire sticking out. Not enough to where it'll cause any kind of connection issues, but it makes sure that the inside of the terminal is only contacting the copper wire, and we won't get any weird issues with connections because of the insulation. But we'll go through and we'll just keep connecting all of our wires until they're all in place. With everything connected, I'll pass my boot back down through. But before I fully connect it, I'm going to take a little bit of dielectric grease. I'm just going to fill up this entire area, and this will hopefully prevent any kind of moisture from getting inside and causing a corrosion buildup. I'll slide the boot over. I'm going to come back, I'm going to wrap the entire plug with some electrical tape. Again, helping protect all the connections inside, but also it's going to help hide some of the colored wires here. And finally, to secure the plug, I'm going to take the included screw and lock nut that comes in our kit. I'll get them loosely attached, one on each side. I'll come back with a Phillips head screwdriver and a 3/8 wrench and tighten up the screws and the nuts holding the plug in place. But now that everything's hooked up, we can put our fascia back in place. But if you're putting a braking system in or any other components, you want to go ahead and do that now, because it will make it a lot easier to run all your wires with the fascia off. Now once you have your fascia back on, the final step is going to be testing your circuit to make sure everything works properly. So you can hook up to your motorhome, or you can use a tester like we're about to. So if I turn on the signals to activate it, you see the taillights are working, as well as the left turn signal, my brake lights, and the right turn signal. All we left to do now is hook up to our motorhome and hit the road. But that'll finish up your look at the Roadmaster high-powered diode wiring kit on our 2017 Jeep Compass.